Hey, and welcome back to Practice Makes Faithful. You're probably not used to hearing my voice first, and I'll explain that in just a minute. This is Season 3, Episode 10. We are in a series for the month of March tied to our Missions Month. I'm Paul Hugobart. This has been Patterson sitting next to me. I'm playing the host role this morning, today. Maybe it's not this morning for you, but today because I'm the host and Ben is in the hot seat today as he delivered the message on Sunday morning here at Grace Chapel. Yes. Really good message, solid thoughts. Very excited to dive into that and to share a little bit about what this week's message really, I think, hit on and the challenges that came out of that. As we are thinking about this series called I Will Love. And we can talk a little bit more about the series.
I'm excited
as we go, for sure. But
it's weird to be on this side of it, but it's going to be fun. I'm excited.
It's equally strange to be on this side of it, but good. No, I'm excited about this, Ben. Yep. I know you're going to have a lot to share that will challenge the folks at home. Especially because, again, this the title of our podcast is Practice Makes Faithful. So we're trying to put into practice the things that we learn on a weekly basis, whether you are here connected with us at Grace Chapel or somewhere else, and just happen to listen in. And we know as we continue to see the increasing numbers of folks that listen or check us out on YouTube, we're thankful for you joining us week to week, and really do hope that this is something that encourages you and is helping you grow as you try to walk in the way of Jesus. That's what we're about here. Practice does make faithful. Not perfect, but practice makes faithful. So welcome back again for episode 10 of season 3. So Ben, maybe we could take just a minute. I'd love to share a little bit about my experiences last week.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
for sure. Yeah, because you mentioned we did our podcast a little different schedule. You were out at Exponential. You want to tell us a bit about how that went, and then we'll dive into Sunday.
Yeah, I can do that. So I'm wearing my Renew Movements hat. Because I got to be a part of the official launch of Renew Movements and was presenting, typically as a guy who sits in the seat of one who leads within a legacy church or prevailing model church or programmatic church or attractional church, whatever label people want to put on that. That's been the predominant model that I have engaged within as a church leader. I got to be down there engaging with church planters. But really taking a lot of the principles that we've talked about over the last several years, these 8 principles that we've observed that are central to the practice in disciple-making movements. They're the why behind the what in these disciple-making movements. So I got to share those with church planters. Again, the theme at Exponential was evangelism, reviving a lost cause. And so it was just really exciting to see so many Christians assemble together. Like 6,000 people, again, coming together saying, yes, we want to be about sharing the message of Jesus because the message of Jesus is connected to the mission of Jesus. And, yes, we want to embrace the methods of Jesus as well, to be disciples who make disciples through the bridge of relationship with people. But we don't want to be shy about evangelism, even though it's kind of become a dirty word, in some circles or taboo. We want to work on reviving evangelism and bring it back to what it really is supposed to be. It's the moment we get to share good news with people. So sharing good news ought never to be a bad thing. It doesn't mean that people will accept the good news or say, yes, I want that every time we share it. Every time we live a life that creates some amount of curiosity, then we get to share the message across that bridge of relationship. We may still experience rejection, but we've got to get back to where we realize the good news really is good news. So it just was exciting to me to see that idea return. And next year's theme has already been announced, and it's about doing a 180 degree turning, getting back to the mission of Jesus, which is to be disciples who make disciples. So it's coming back to the mission, discipleship, disciple making. And so I just love that I'm getting to witness kind of from an inside chair at times, have an inside view to what's happening in the North American church, at least some of it. This real revival of an understanding that we do have the best news ever that we get to share with people.
That's awesome.
To see so many church leaders coming back to say, we've got to be disciples who make disciples. Talking with Bobby Harrington at the conference, and so I was there with Renew. Bobby's a point leader for Renew and discipleship.org. One of the things Bobby was saying is, 10 years ago, when he and Jim Putman wrote together the book Disciple Shift, he said it was like we were the only ones talking about this.
Yeah.
The need to be disciples who make disciples, the need to see our churches shift from primarily programmatic environments, creating programmatic environments, to really trying to teach, train, and equip disciples to make disciples. He said it was like we were the only ones talking about it, and he said now it's like everyone's talking about it, which is pretty cool, really, when you think about it. He said, now the trouble is, a whole lot of people are talking about it, and we only have some people doing it. So really making the transition to doing it is a whole new thing, but sometimes we have to talk about something, be aware of it, understand the problem, discuss it enough before all of a sudden we're propelled into action. So I'm hoping what comes out of the talk is action, so that we're not all talk, but that we are really a lot of action. I'm excited that I think a lot of the things that we've been talking about at a lot of these conferences, whether it be Exponential, Renew, discipleship.org, and some others, Aspire as well, that what we're talking about at these conferences is what I see happening here at Grace Chapel. I mean, we've watched a culture shift. We've watched people move more out and step out in courage into the adventurous mission that Jesus has invited us onto, to really be disciples who make disciples as we go. And so just thrilled that I got to be a part of a conference with so many leaders and others who want to do what Jesus has called us to do. Go into the world, teach, baptize, make disciples.
I love that. I think that's a great connection.
It is.
Some of where we're going in this series this month, today.
Yes.
And thankful for you being a part of that movement.
Yeah, glad to do it. As we've already said, we're working through this series for the month called I Will Love. And so Ben, maybe the two of us could work together actually to provide a little bit of a summary to talk about the whys and the what's connected to this series. And then following that, we'll take some time so that you can share specifically what you talked about this weekend. So
that's great.
Again, the theme, I Will Love. And we're moving through 4 different movements. We started last week with I Will Love the Gospel. So really loving the good news. I mean, that's what we were just talking about at Exponential this past week. Really loving the good news about Jesus and understanding that it is something we can love and should love. And something that Jesus even calls us to give our lives and, especially to live our lives for. Even if we're not called to lay down our lives, he still says, pick up your life and go live it for me. Lay down your life, pick up your cross, live your life for the sake of the gospel. Live it for me and the gospel, Jesus says. And in that, comes the greatest reward of all. And so, we're in Missions Month where we're trying to compel and challenge and call our folks to give generously for the sake of supporting mission efforts globally and maybe even some here domestically. And so next week actually is the 19th. Will be on Sunday, and we will take up that offering.
Mission Sunday.
Mission Sunday, hoping that that our folks are ready to give. I've been thinking, about what we're going to give as we go in to this, so that we really can give to the most important thing we could possibly give to. So many causes we could give to, so many things we could choose to give, use our own money for. But really, when it gets down to it, there's nothing better than giving to support the advancing of the gospel, the mission. We'll talk later next week about, I will love my neighbor, and then I will love this world. I mean, all the things that Jesus calls us to love. I don't know if you.
I kind of see this series a little bit. It's a little bit like an anthology of kind of these 4 ideas. It doesn't build in the way that some of our series do, but it's these 4 ideas that are connected to missions. They're loosely kind of connected around this idea of missions, of our missions month here. And I think with each of these, there is a challenge built into it, just built into that title to say, I will love the mission.
That's right.
And it's a challenge to say, if you don't love the mission, we're saying in this that this is something that disciples of Jesus, that you should love. We're saying each of these things is something disciples of Jesus should love. And also, as I mentioned in my message yesterday, if you're not a disciple of Jesus, you're getting a little peek in of hey, this is these are some of the priorities that disciples of Jesus should be committing their lives to. They should be deeply loving.
Agreed.
So,
agreed. And the common cause we can join in, especially as we're looking, one of the big struggles of our day and age is just that so many are experiencing just this real lack, this void of meaning and purpose, and therefore value 100%. To their lives. And a lot of people concluding, there is no value to my life. We've talked several times about this idea of deaths of despair and how they are on the rise, and people are, I saw a news headline the other day calling it the new pandemic, and that, we ought to be aware of how many people are losing hope in life, feeling like their life does not contribute to anything, their life has no value. And the reality is, apart from the mission of Jesus, it is tough to find value. You just have to make it up. So when we come to what God has called us to, what we're doing is not finding or making up value, we're discovering the value and purpose that He's always given us. And so, with that, talk a little bit about this week's message, if you will, so that we can kind of get a flavor, because I think this is where we discover there's meaning and purpose and real value to my life right?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So I will love the mission, right? So this week, opened up our message. I started off with a story of my first time going on a mission trip, of going to India, and sharing a little bit about that, sharing some hesitation around that, but truly just growing a love for it, right? Well, being there, growing a love for mission trips in general. I mean, just from that point, I went to India another 2 times after, 3 times total, and then started with our New Orleans mission trip that we started with our youth ministry, and helping co-lead that with Rocky, our youth pastor, and it's just become something I've been super passionate about, excited about, because in that context, at a mission trip, people do just come alive to the mission, right?
Yes.
It is a week where you're with a group of like-minded people for that whole time, that you're fully focused on the mission. And that is an awesome thing. And I love it. And I'm all for mission trips because of that.
Sure.
However, it creates a potential problem, because it can make us aware of a conflict. Maybe it doesn't create a problem, maybe it exposes a problem.
Right.
And it exposes this conflict between our missional life and our secular life. And I've even at times, I've seen multiple times where we've gotten together with like our final huddle for some of our teenagers in the evening, and I've heard people sharing that they don't want to go home. Like they want to go home and get to their bed, sure, but they don't want to go home because they don't want to lose sight of the mission. Like in this week, they've been fully focused on the mission, and once they get back, they're going to have to do school, they're going to have to just do family responsibilities, all of just their regular things in life, their secular life, if you will, and they're going to get caught up in that, and it's going to drown out the mission. So it's as if these two things I had up on the screen, missional life versus secular life, it's as if they're competing against one another sometimes, we feel, and it's creating this conflict. And I went on to say that if we're living in that, if we're separating those two things, we are making the mission of Jesus way too small. So from that point, the obvious question is, well, what is the mission of Jesus? So I unpacked that in I love tracing things as a theme throughout Scripture. So I love going back to Genesis 1. Typically, when we're answering a question like that, I think there's a ton of questions. We can start back in the first couple pages of our Bible and trace it, see it throughout Scripture. So I kind of wanted to start there and start in the beginning. What is the mission? And we see from the beginning, right, God's creating this good world. He creates a good world. He creates good humans in that world. And then he commissions these humans. He gives these humans a task. He says that they're created in his image, which is an amazing thing. What does that mean? We might talk about that a little bit more as we go forward. But he gives these humans this task in Genesis 1:28. He says he tasks them to rule over creation. To fill the earth, to subdue it, to multiply, and to rule over this creation. And as I kind of tease that out, and I've learned some teaching from Bible Project that's really helped shape the way I think of this, understand this. I think in that, God wants us to rule and reign over creation in a way that brings goodness into the world, because we are God's image, and God is a good God. It's everything we see. If you just look at Genesis 1, everything we know about God is that he's all powerful and that he's all good. That everything he's created is good. He defines what's good and bad. He's created all goodness. So if we are to be his image, when he tells us to rule and reign, well, this means that we're to do this in a way that's good, not in a way that is hurting the world, not in a way that is abusive of power, because sometimes someone could read rule and see that as a license to, I get to subdue creation, I can do whatever I want to it, and frankly, I think the church and many people have taken that model throughout history,
I think
and we see a lot of problems in our, even just in our physical world. Certainly the way people are treated, we see that, but you look at how our physical world has been treated, of pollution, of climate problems, of things of that nature, to where I don't know that we're ruling this world in a way that brings goodness.
Yeah, I think it's good. If I could just pause you right
Please.
there real quick. I think that's a super solid point, in that I have heard people, even Christians, say when there are complaints about the way things go, and sometimes maybe looking around, some might say that again, that there is mistreatment and misuse of this good earth and planet that God has given us, and some Christians will come back and say, well, it doesn't really matter, it's all, as a friend of mine used to say, it's all kindling for the great fire anyway, so who cares? And that was really his attitude. It's all kindling for the great fire, it's all going to be burned up, so who cares what we do with this? And yes, the license to rule, or let's say not license, so we've taken the charge to rule and reign as image bearers of God, as license to rule and reign maybe, and therefore the idea of exploiting this is sometimes something that we can become very comfortable with, and certainly through, if you look at the expansionist ideals of the 15th into the late 15th and the 16th and the 17th centuries, and even into the 18th century as well, whatever resource there was, the idea was, let's go take that because it's ours anyway. So when you have that mindset, that's a very different mindset than the one that you're trying to paint for us. That
fair.
We ought not to be the ones who go and take what, because we believe it's all ours anyway. It's stewarding more than a taking, is what it sounds like to me. Is that fair?
100%. Well, and I kind of would want to gently respond to the friend who might ask, who cares, and say, God cares. Like, what did God say? God said his world's good. So why would he want us to come in and make it not good and break it and hurt it? And and even if that is your perspective, you see it's all going to get burnt up in the end. Hey, God said it was good. Like, he made a good world. So why would we come in and think that we should just go and break it?
And even if there is a brokenness right now, and there is an element of not goodness, should we contribute to the not goodness, or should we do something else? I think. Do
we just live into the fact that, because obviously, as we see, humans are tasked to rule and reign. We're to do this in a way that brings goodness. But we obviously do see that we failed at that. Like, we see this in our own experience. We see this in the story of Scripture. We see this in Genesis 3, right? We see the story of the fall, of humans deciding to see that I want to do what seems right in my own eyes rather than what God says is right, which, interesting note there, what the lie that Satan is giving them, and is saying, hey, come and take this fruit and you'll be like God. They're already like God. They were made in God's image. Like, God already did this. So what is it's this lie of to come and be like God in this way of rebelling against God, of so it is this lie. It's like every good lie is based on a nugget of truth.
Yeah,
and it's as if Satan is taking and manipulating this thing that God has just said, you're made in my image. They're God's images. And then Satan is taking that, twisting it and saying, no, come and do it this way.
Yes.
So I just find that's a side note. That wasn't in my message. That's a freebie for you, those of you listening to the podcast. So as we continue, we see this brokenness in the world. The world is broken from human evil, from the fall. And God wanted to redeem that world. He's wanted to redeem this. So he launches this plan. I didn't go super into detail, but I mean, you see all throughout the Old Testament, right? It starts with Abraham. Abraham, this one being called out of many and saying, Abraham, I'm going to make your family this great nation. We see Abraham, his family grows. Isaac, Jacob. Jacob changes his name to Israel. Israel grows into the children of Israel. They're in captive in Egypt. They get freed. Moses comes in. They're wandering in the wilderness. They start this small nation ruled by judges. Eventually this grows into the monarchy. And you see this nation that God is using in his plan to redeem the world, this family starting with Abraham. Eventually we see the exile, right, of enemy nations come in as this judgment against this nation that once again is failing, that Israel is failing again to live the way God has called them to live. But all throughout that, God had a grand plan in it. The master plan was Jesus from the very beginning, that he's using this nation. It's almost this cradle that Jesus raises up out of, right? And then Jesus comes on the scene. And when Jesus comes on the scene, you see his life is defined by goodness. He goes around, he is proclaiming the kingdom of God, and he is spreading this kingdom. You see healing, miracles are happening, all this incredible stuff Jesus is going around and doing, proclaiming that his kingdom is here. And Jesus, I would contend, Jesus is living the way that humans were made to live. Jesus is living, he's the second Adam, Paul even calls him. He's the one who's living the way Adam was supposed to live, but Adam fell. He's living truly as God's image in a way that none of us have been able to, in a way that all of us have failed to do. And then, after his death, burial, resurrection, he commissions his followers to go out and spread this movement. He says, go out, make disciples of every nation, and do what? Teach them to be saved so they go to heaven? No, he says, teach them to obey all of my teachings. Going to heaven's a part of it. I'm not in any way against discrediting going to heaven. That's amazing gift. But Jesus is telling them, go and teach them to obey my teachings. Like he wants them to be his disciples here on earth. He wants them to live the way they were created to live, in a way that's bringing goodness into God's world. So through all of that, I said that our mission is to spread God's goodness into the world and to make disciples of Jesus that do the same. It's a dual mission. It's a dual vocation, I've heard it described as, of living out this original purpose to rule and reign over God's world in a way that brings goodness. And that's in everything I do, whether it's through fixing a car, making dinner, doing the kids' laundry, whatever. I'm bringing goodness. And then as I'm doing that, I'm going along and I'm using opportunities to make disciples and to teach other people. You go and follow Jesus' teaching. You live the life God made you to live also. So that's the mission. And then I went on to say that as we think about loving the mission, I think what it really looks like to love the mission is to live the mission. Is that we need to live this out in our lives. And we need to get rid of this divide between missional life and secular life. And see that everything is missional. That as followers of Jesus, it's all missional. No,
that's good. That's good, and it really helps us to see maybe a more holistic form of living out the mission of Jesus. I think oftentimes we do just think about it in the sense of, okay, the mission is called to go. The mission for us is to be called to go out to do the works of evangelism, and definitely that's a part of it. And there was a time, I think, maybe where where the stage was set well enough for many of us who are believers that we could kind of get away with just going out and doing the evangelism thing, even when it was just the very simple act of handing out tracts or a postcard or something else, because there was kind of a framework within which people understood that, and it might have raised a little bit of curiosity because they were already inherently curious to some degree. But as things have shifted, I think what you're sharing with us makes a lot of sense, and it's really the original intent anyway. The original intent is that we would live such lives, I guess, that it would raise a curiosity in people, that when we start to speak about the reason for, the reason we believe, the reason we hold true, that at that point in time, the lives that we're living would have raised some curiosity, would move people to wondering, would move people to actually desiring to hear from us, as opposed to just we skip straight to telling people about the gospel. And so I think that's really good. So as you...
And I would add to that, I would add to that to simply say that I think doing good in God's world is a means to an end in making disciples, and it's also an end in itself, in that I think God does care about how we live our lives here. Of what we are doing with His world, with His creation, how we are treating other people. So even if it doesn't lead to, we should always be looking for that opportunity to make that disciple. But if it doesn't lead there, and if it is just, I'm giving a cup of cold water to someone to help them out when they're in need, that I am living in a world that's living in a way that's being a good steward of this world, that is good in and of itself.
That's good.
As a follower of Jesus, I want to always be pointing to that next step of making that disciple. But if it doesn't in a moment, like let's say you spend all day and you're like, okay, I'm living in this way that spreads goodness all day, but a discipleship conversation never popped up today. First off, that's kind of short-term thinking. There's this could be a longer thing. But secondly, I would just say that wasn't a failed day. You lived good in God's world. You lived faithfully. And what opportunities come out of that, you can't always control, but you can control how you be faithful to living in a way that brings goodness, life, peace, shalom into God's world, not in a way that brings destruction.
Yeah, that's really good. I heard someone say a while back, every day live the life of a faithful witness, and when the opportunity comes, faithfully witness.
That's good. I like that.
So in the sense that we're, as you said, reflecting the image. That's live the life of a faithful witness. And when you get the chance, faithfully witness. So we are sharing. We've often talked about witnessing. We think is just what we do and we share with somebody about our faith, but more often than not in Scripture, the idea of being a faithful witness is what comes first. Be a faithful witness, and then when the opportunity comes, faithfully witness. Well, one of the things that you talked about this week that you leaned into, and I think it's something that many of us could identify with, is, again, as you presented at the beginning, this tension that many followers of Jesus feel, especially those who like yourself, have been on short-term mission trips. It's this tension that often exists between kind of the lives we live when we're here at home that are busy, packed full of stuff, right? I think about, in our lives as baseball season begins and it's in full swing, and we could rightly be criticized for the way we live our lives sometimes in baseball and softball season, with my 7-year-old daughter playing softball, my middle son playing baseball, my oldest son playing baseball for 2 teams that he's committed to, and then moonlighting for another team, right? And so it seems like we could be all over the place, and we could look at that and we could say, I just don't have time to be a disciple maker, to spread the goodness of God, right? So we could say, in my secular busy life, how am I going to do that? Now, again, the tension comes up because we've been on a mission trip where we were solely there with the purpose to do what? To witness. To be a faithful witness, and as the opportunity comes, faithfully witness to the goodness of God. But you talked a bit more about, you talked about this idea, and I've heard this actually termed this way, that this is called dichotomizing. So we're saying, here's my secular life, here's my missional or my sacred life. You talked about the fact that we ought not dichotomize in that sense. So can you spend a little bit more time fleshing that out? This idea, again, there shouldn't be this divide between sacred and mission, or a secular and missional, or secular and sacred. How would you help us understand that more fully?
Man, that's good. That's really good. Okay, so I think maybe underlying the separation between secular and missional is a separation at times between secular spiritual. That we can separate these categories of our lives of like, these things that I do are spiritual things. These things that I do are secular things. When I am reading scripture, this is a spiritual thing. When I am sharing the gospel, this is a spiritual thing. When I'm at church, this is a spiritual thing. When I am mowing the grass, this is a secular thing. So it's kind of these separations that we make. But I guess I wonder, what makes something spiritual? What makes something spiritual? I don't know if you've thought about that before. What makes something spiritual? And I think what makes something spiritual is the Spirit, right? It's the Holy Spirit. It's the Holy Spirit being in that, infusing that. So if you're a follower of Jesus, if you're a disciple, you've been baptized, you have the Holy Spirit living in you, everything you do is spiritual. You don't separate that. Like, there's not a separation. The Spirit is with you. It's not that the Spirit's with you when you're reading Scripture, but then when you finish your quiet time and you go to make breakfast, the Spirit's like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to hang out here by the Bible. You can go and cook your breakfast, but I'll see you again tomorrow morning. No, the Spirit's not doing that. The Spirit indwells you. It lives in you. So now everything you do is now spiritual. Like, there's not a separation there if the Spirit is living in you. Now, I do think it's fair, and I mentioned this in my message, that it's possible that you are doing some things that couldn't be spiritual, that the Spirit isn't going to go with you on that, and those are some things that you don't need to be doing. Like, if you're doing something that's not spiritual, that is not a neutral thing. Like, cooking breakfast, that's not good, bad. Like, that's a neutral thing. The Spirit's going to be with you in that, but if you are doing something that's not, then there may be some exceptions there for sure. But if you're a follower of Jesus, the Spirit lives in you, and He is with you in that, in whatever you're doing. So to make this separation, I've got a spiritual life, a secular life, just isn't healthy if the Spirit lives in you all the time. Those categories can't be there. So then we go to the separation I was specifically talking about in secular versus missional, and it's the same kind of thing where we think these certain areas of my life are missional. This is where I'm focused on being on mission. It's in these certain spots, but not when I'm just doing my regular life, my regular tasks, my regular chores. That's just mundane, normal, 9 to 5, that there's nothing missional about that. But the Spirit's with you, empowering you through all of that. And then I look back at the Genesis 1, the task to rule and reign over God's creation in a way that's bringing goodness, in a way that images God. And that impacts everything you do. Everything you do. It doesn't matter if that thing feels spiritual to you or not, that no, you're to do that in a way that's bringing goodness. Once again, there's a few things that inherently are never going to bring goodness into God's world. So it could never be missional. Don't do that thing. Like, it's not just take a break from being missional while you go and do this. No, don't do that thing. You should not be doing anything in your life that's not missional. And I don't mean to say this arrogantly, as if I have that all figured out. I'm not in any way trying to say that. I don't have this all figured out. I am learning. I'm a disciple of Jesus that's on this journey, learning myself and trying to learn in these areas where I'm not always missional. I'm not saying I have this all together or speaking as some expert, but I am speaking as a learner of Scripture, and as I'm gaining a greater understanding of this, that would be what I would just say, is that there shouldn't be a spot of your life that's only secular. The Spirit's with you in all of it, and you can be missional in all of it. If you're doing something that can't be, it probably shouldn't be a part of your life.
Yeah, That's great. Yeah. So I think about even just my life right now as you know, I've got hours tied up in helping my kids become better baseball players, right? You know, the focus of that is not just to become a better baseball player then, and we talk about this often with our boys, it's about how you engage as a witness to Jesus on that field, or a witness of Jesus on that field. And it's how, when I coach, you know, I think you make the point about there are some things that you should just stop doing, and then there are other things you need to just repurpose in a sense too.
Yes.
You know, and so, man, I love to win with the best of them. You know, I had this competitive streak and flair in me that sometimes can be unhealthy. That's the flesh in me. But the spirit in me calls me to behave differently than to get all riled up or get fussy with the umpire or to yell at the coach who's yelling at me or whatever it happens to be. How can I engage on the field so that I don't compromise my ability to bring good into something because I brought bad into it instead? And so, yeah, I think that point, and that was one thing I'm sitting there thinking as you're sharing this message is, man, I've got a lot of busy time coming up, but my busy time is going to be all around people. Constantly I'm around people.
Yeah.
So instead of the things that we think, what I feel like I'm hearing from you, instead of the things that we often feel are barriers to actually doing the things that God has called us to do, live into those things and they actually become opportunities to live the mission of Jesus more faithfully.
Yeah.
So I think that's great.
For sure. I think of... thinking of living in a way that brings goodness. Sometimes, I think that there may be times that someone would think that someone is only called to be on mission if if you're working what you and I do. We both work in a church. So I think sometimes some people may have this idea that, hey, we are called to live on mission, but I am just an IT guy. I'm not called to be on mission. But what would it look like to take that mindset into it? Right now, you and I are both working on we both have our notes open on MacBooks. And imagine you have that guy who may feel like, I'm not called to be missional because I don't work at a church. I just work at Apple. Well, okay. What this guy's work is doing, and it's helping enable us to be able to use these Macs that we're using to write our notes, to create this podcast, to help to help craft our messages. Like we use these things constantly throughout our days in our work, and I would say it's a good thing. I would say having this Mac is a good thing. It's a good byproduct of God's world that some very creative people have been able to put this together in a way that has created a really good piece of technology in God's world. What if that guy who just works at Apple, who thinks that maybe my job isn't too significant because I'm just doing this, what if he were to take the mindset that, no, what I'm doing is I'm creating something good. I'm bringing goodness into the world, and I have this attitude in everything that I do is that I'm made by a good God. So I want to do something good with my life. And I have this attitude, this mentality, and then people start asking me questions, and I start looking for opportunities to make disciples out of it, that his job is every bit as much missional, if not more missional, than our jobs are at times. He's every day surrounded by people where he can bring goodness into the world.
Yeah. So what you're describing then is almost the difference between Burger King and Chick-fil-A.
Okay.
I mean, I don't mean to knock Burger King, but
I'm tracking with
but
you.
let's be honest. I mean,
Burger King
they all serve. You know, you got these fast food restaurants. They serve food, but when I go to Chick-fil-A, the way that I'm engaged with there.
That's a really good example.
You know, my pleasure.
Yes.
What can I do to help you? What can I do to serve you? And it's part of the culture and the attitude. Yes. It's not that you don't go to Burger King or McDonald's or somewhere else and find people from time to time that have made it their personal mission to engage that way. You certainly will, and there are great people that work at both places.
But organizationally, Chick-fil-A is embodying.
But organizationally, because they have this value of maybe they do have the value, I think, inherently of wanting to spread God goodness in a sense, as you say. there's just a different approach to that. And so maybe let's dig a little deeper on that.
That's really good. I wish I had that for yesterday. I would have used that in my message.
Man, there would have been somebody out there who would have loved Burger King and would have been offended. But hey, just for the record, I can knock Burger King a little bit because I worked at Burger King in my college years. Oh man, there's so many stories we could share about the Burger King days. It was the kind of thing. Actually, the guy who owned the Burger Kings in the town where I went to college was a Christian guy and would give jobs to all college students, and so it was great. And actually, the environment there at the Burger Kings was pretty great. But just saying this, difference between most other fast food restaurants, not just singling out Burger King and Chick-fil-A. So sorry, Burger King. Although their new commercials are pretty entertaining. All right, so let's get back to the idea that we're thinking about here, because I think this one is worth fleshing out just a little bit further. I think you really worked hard this past weekend, and you are even now, to kind of paint this picture of what a truly faithful disciple of Jesus looks like, right? So I'm just going to call out one of the things that you said that really stood out to me that we've already been touching on already, but let's be just real explicit about this. Okay. So one of the things, again, that you said that stood out was this. So I'll just read it and then let's dig deeper into it. And especially maybe we can hone in on why this is so important for Christians, for disciples of Jesus living in the 21st century. So here's what you said. Jesus calls us to make disciples, not just so that others can go to heaven, which that's important, as we already said, but that we might lead and call others to live lives as Jesus did and spread the goodness of God everywhere we go. So again, we often place a lot of emphasis on evangelism, but not necessarily on spreading God's goodness. So why do you think that spreading God's goodness, as you put it, matters so much, especially as we are trying to make disciples? Yes, we do it because it is an end in itself, but as we think about it in the terms of maybe it being a means to another end, and even an eternal end, why do you think that having this frame of mind is so important?
Yeah. First and foremost, because God is good. Yeah. Like essentially to His nature, He is good. I mean, we could stop right there and just say that we are to image God, and He is good. So we are to be good as well, to do good as well. But I would say also because I think God still cares about His world. I think He still cares about His world, His creation, that it is broken. It is broken. And I don't want to minimize that in any way, that it is really broken. That people have broken it, sin has broken it, evil has broken it. But I don't think that God has stopped caring about it, that He created it as good. Evil stepped in, evil broke it. So the question is, are we to just live into just accept, okay, the world's broken, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what we do. And what we do here on this physical world doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter how I treat people. It doesn't matter how I interact with creation because it's all broken. Or are we to live the way we were created to live? With an acknowledgement that says it's never going to be perfect this side of heaven, right? And I see that. I'm not arguing that that we are going to make things perfect, that we're going to fix all the brokenness. We can't do that. That this is it is cosmically broken. There's evil at play here, and until Jesus steps in and sets that straight, it's never going to be fully fixed. But are we to live in a way that just says it's broken, so we're going to embrace that? Or are we to live in a way that says this is what it was so intended to be, and I want to live into that. Yes. I want to live into how God made us to be. So I think that in spreading goodness, this is the way that we're living the way that God made us to live. Yeah. It's almost a question of perpetuating either goodness or perpetuating brokenness, and we can do one of the two. Yeah. And maybe our default, because we are broken, is actually to perpetuate brokenness. Yes. And so we have to reconnect with the Spirit at work in us to perpetuate the goodness. So why do you think in this day and age that matters so much to maybe a watching world, a world of unbelievers, a world of, a continent of post-Christian people? Why do you think that matters so much? Because I think Christians have gotten this wrong for a while. I don't think we've always done a great job at embracing it. Sometimes we're embracing spreading God's goodness. Sometimes we're going out acting a fool and starting culture wars and whatnot, and things that are really giving a bad image to Christianity and ultimately to the God that we're representing as his images. And so I think when we embrace this mindset that says that, no, I need to spread goodness in everything we do to a watching world, it's going to start raising some questions of why are these people acting like this? And eventually they're going to say, oh, we're acting like this because this is how we were created, because this is reflecting the God that we were created to reflect. So as opposed to living the way the rest of the world lives, starting fights, going out, just causing chaos here in the world, I mean, that's not reflecting our God.
No, and that's, what's so tough about that is we know that there are going to be people that reject God, but let's not let the reason they reject God because we're misrepresenting him.
Yes.
And so if we're doing that, even as you were speaking, I just had this kind of weightiness settling in me that the reality is a lot of people have rejected God, not because of who God is, but because of who they think he is, because of the way we've misrepresented him at times. And so reestablishing a healthy witness and a robust and a what you're painting is a holistic witness of the way God would want to interact with this world through us.
So I want to use this example cautiously, because I don't want to lose anyone here who may disagree on the specifics.
Stay with us.
Stay with me. All right. I remember I was having a conversation with a student once who was talking about climate change. And she was talking about climate change, and for her, in her understanding, and I am not arguing that she's correct. I think there's aspects that maybe that I think the way she was representing it probably isn't, but she was fairly extreme in her mindset about climate change and thought that the world would be unlivable in 20, 30 years if we don't do something about this. So that's an extreme viewpoint. I'm not advocating that she's correct, but this was her felt reality that she believed to be true. So when she saw the church doing nothing, seemingly to not care about the climate, about God's physical world.
It's all kindling anyway.
Exactly.
For the great fire, so who cares?
She sees that as a human issue. Your friend may not. Your friend just doesn't see that as a human issue. She sees it as a human issue that's going to affect her future, how she can live in this world, her kids' future, and so on. So to her, when the church has this attitude to say that, oh, I don't really care about that. It's all kindling. It's all going to burn up. It's not a big deal. To her, that feels like you don't care about me. You don't care about my future. You don't care about the world here that God put here. And she is one that, and I think this is true with a lot of younger folks who do take environmental issues a little bit more seriously. So, I mean, man, we just think about that, of the witness that we're presenting to a younger generation that maybe has grown up in school thinking about the environment, having a lot more teaching around this, and that cares deeply about that. And if we as the church show that we don't, that's going to create a disconnect. Now, I'm not saying that we just automatically jump on board with what I think she's had a pretty extreme view. There's room for conversation there with her as well. But I think we would also agree it's extreme to say it's all going to burn up, so we shouldn't care about it at all. That no, God created this world. We're supposed to live in it in a way that creates goodness. So there are unhealthy extremes on both sides. But if we're modeling to a watching next generation, a watching world that we don't care, some people are going to disconnect with us because of that. And I think we should care. I think we should care about how we treat the world. What that means, there's a lot of room for conversation there.
Yes.
And I don't claim to be an expert on how we care for these things well, and this, that, and the other. But I think we can all agree that there's ways that are good in the way that we treat God's world, and there's ways that are not good. And we can have a conversation about specifics of what that could look like. And I would want to bring experts to the table who are more scientific and know what they're talking about. But that's one example that I remember having this conversation with her, and it just hit me. I'm like, wow, this is interesting. That if I show that I don't really care about this, that's going to create a disconnect.
What was heard from her perspective was, that you don't really care about her.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think, there's a lot of room for operation once we adopt the viewpoint that says, I care about you, even if maybe I don't agree with your point of view, I really care about you. And so how can we have a conversation that maybe does then reflect God's goodness instead of, when we don't disagree with people, our temptation is to move straight into, well, you must be crazy, and especially as it relates to this particular issue.
Yes.
Everybody on the opposite sides, the extremes, thinks the people on the other opposite extremes are crazy. So, okay, so that's maybe one kind of specific way. Give us, as we kind of wrap up, what is maybe some general guidance? Because again, practice makes faithful. So how can we practice what we learn about reflecting God's goodness into this world as part of the mission or central to the mission that we've been given? How can we then turn around and practice that so that we're more faithful to Jesus?
My bottom line yesterday was quite simple, to say, love the mission by living the mission. So my challenge would be to live the mission, but let's get a little bit more specific than that. As my challenge would be to really spend some time thinking about, reflecting on what would it look like if I lived every day, everything I do, as if I was on mission, as if it was missional. What if you were to get rid of those categories in your mind that separates these things are missional, these things aren't, and you were to say, no, everything I do could be an opportunity to be missional, and to really think about that in each aspect of your life, of how could this be missional? How can I be spreading God's goodness through what I'm doing? How can I be making disciples through what I'm doing? How can I be doing those two things? And think through, maybe just take a minute to sit down, reflect, think through each aspect of your life. Think about what you do on a given day. I'll think for myself. Okay, so I get up, I shower, spend a little bit of time in quiet time. I go to the gym. I go to work. I will cook dinner. I think of each of these elements of my life. I could just take each one and say, okay, what would it look like if when I went to the gym, I took an attitude that I'm going to be missional when I'm at the gym? How might that change the way I work out? It's not going to change what I'm physically doing. It's not going to change my workout routine. But there is going to be a shift of my mindset in here that says, I want to spread God's goodness. I'm not going to be a jerk to people. I'm not going to completely disconnect. I like to listen to podcasts while I'm working out. I'm still going to do that, but I don't want to do that in a way that is abrasive. It's pushing people away. I'm not going to shut down opportunities for conversation. I'm not going to be rude in how long I'm taking on a piece of equipment. I'm going to take the little wipes, even though it's a pain and no one likes to do it, and I'm going to clean my equipment afterwards. These are just little things that it's a little shift in my mind to say, I'm not just working out. I'm spreading God's goodness when I'm here. So there's little things that I can just tweak in my mindset and make small changes. So sometimes there may be some things that you need to make a big change in your life to do this, but there's a lot of things that it's just a small change. It's just a shift of a mindset to say, I'm not just working out, I'm living on mission.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I think that's, the challenge to be more intentional is one that we all need to take very seriously, because I think sometimes we do have this very intentional dichotomy. We've created a dichotomy. Sometimes it's just that we don't realize the dichotomy exists and we're living into something because we haven't thought about it further. So you're challenged to really think about this. that is the first step in so many movements as we're trying to practice to be more faithful to Jesus, is just to think a little deeper than kind of the cruise control that we often operate in, and especially as it relates to being the reflection of God in this world, even one that's distorted and broken sometimes, but being that reflection so that some of that goodness of God is reflecting around as we go, and then praying again for those opportunities that come out of that. I think that's really good, Ben. So we hope that you will do that this week. Really take that challenge to heart. See if God does not create opportunities for you to make the world around you just a little bit better. And then out of that too, if God doesn't create the next step opportunities to really share what better looks like through and in and because of Jesus Christ. So we thank you for joining us this week. We do love it when you reach out to us with comments. I check the Practice Makes Faithful email from time to time. We read their comments on YouTube for sure. So, definitely would love for you to connect with us that way. And if you enjoyed this podcast, we don't ask this often, but leave us some feedback. Leave us a review.
That'd be awesome.
Give us a thumbs up, a like, all that kind of stuff. We enjoy that. And,
that really helps in your podcast app if you leave a review. Because it's just going to help. Apple is going to recommend it to more people if there's more reviews in Apple. So that would really help us out.
Yeah, it's not that Ben and I get together every time we get a positive review and go out to lunch and just celebrate or anything. It just is that more people find. Do we do that? No, we don't.
No, we don't.
Is that more people are able to find the podcast that way too. So again, we appreciate you all. So thankful for you tuning in, and we look forward to next week's conversation as we get to share more about loving in this world as God loves this world as well. God bless you all. See you then.